We'll be meeting from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday. Now, colleagues, we have already heard from the PSPC officials. They will not be making an opening statement. And we do have the speaking notes from the Privy Council office that have been distributed in both official languages. And I would like to move, colleagues, similar to what I've done on a number of occasions before, to allow us to get more time for questions. I move that the speaking notes presented by Matthew Shea of the Privy Council office be taken as read and appended to the evidence of today's meeting. Do I have consent for that motion? Hearing no dissent, then, colleagues, we will go directly into questions, and it will be a 6-minute round, followed by 5-minute, followed by 2.5-minute rounds, as per our normal routine motions. The first witness or first intervener will come from Mr. McCauley for 6 minutes. Mr. McCauley, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just quickly say welcome back to Mr. Blakey. Mr. Shea, welcome back as well. It's good to have you with us. The two main items that you have in the SUPs, I'll start with the funding for communications and marketing, 48 million rounded up. What exactly is that for, please? And can you provide a breakdown of what it's being used for?
Yeah, I'll turn to my colleague, Ken McKillop, who will give you an overview of what we're spending that funding on.
Thanks.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to explain this. Advertising, obviously, a very effective way to increase awareness.
Because of lack of time, can you just give us the breakdown, please?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so the it's 49.5 million, as you know, and we have the first bit, which is 10 million within that for an extension of the $30 million public health agency campaign that's currently out on COVID-19, and 12 million of that will be used for an extension of the $10 million Finance Canada campaign that we're doing right now. $2.9 million towards the PCO COVID communications response team, and the remainder of funds, approximately 25 million, will be held to keep flexibility on communications. For instance, if we have upcoming campaigns on a vaccine, if that becomes available.
So you only have plans for spending 24 million of it
at this particular time. That's correct.
Okay. Walk me through. First of all, how did you get the other 25 million past Treasury Board if it's just to be held in case something comes up? Couldn't every department always slam a few million away just in case something comes up? And the other question I have is, what is exactly the advertising being used for? We all know COVID's on the TV every second, every newspaper, every Facebook feed, everything. It's COVID all the time. Break down exactly those 4 items, what we're actually advertising. And where's the advertising going? Is it in newspapers? Is it going to Facebook, US-based companies? Is it staying in Canada to support Canadian journalism, if you can?
Absolutely can. As you know, the virus is unprecedented, and you know, our communication efforts need to remain flexible. And so you will have seen the ads for Dr. Tam, who's been on TV. You've seen the encouraging physical distancing. You've seen Chris Hadfield, Haley Wickentheiser out there encouraging us to stay home, save lives.
Let me ask you a question. Where's the direction coming from for this? The reason I ask, it's a lot of money. And everyone knows about social distancing. Everyone knows there's COVID going on. Do you find it justifiable to spend the $50 million on something that every single person knows about?
Well, you know, you're not wrong. People know about it because we've advertised.
No, I think it's because it's on the news cycle 24 hours a day. I'm asking, do you think this is a fair use of taxpayers' money to advertise about something that every single person in the entire world knows is going on right now?
I do think it's worth the money to advertise to Canadians on health and safety and what we're asking them to do. Again, the virus has been unpredictable, and so we are advertising, for instance, back, as I mentioned, when Dr. Tam first came out and was advertising about social distancing, we've then evolved that advertising to encouraging folks to stay home once the lockdown hit. Now we've advertised as well on the economic portion and the financial incentives for Canadians. And just so, if I may just add, the advertising, the recall rate on our ads has been 85%. So people are getting the message.
Well, because I think they know about COVID. I don't think it's your ads. Where's the advertising? What medium are you using, please? How much is Google, Facebook, and how much is Canadian companies? If you haven't gone right in front of you, let us know later.
I could tell you that on the fact that what they've spent this year, more than 80% of the placements were in Canadian media, including 16% in print, dailies, weeklies, that's the Aboriginal newspapers.
I'm going to move on. The next item in the SUPs, 7.7 million for funding to support the MROs and transfers, the regional minister's office. What exactly is that for, please?
That item covers a number of different sub-items. So one of them is the transfer of exempt staff that were previously under PSPC are now reporting to the Deputy PM. And so that's just a straight transfer. It's not new funding or an increase in cost to taxpayer. It's just a transfer between two departments. The second piece is about support to the Deputy PM and her role and mandate letter commitments in terms of establishing more regional engagement, consultation, and that sort of thing.
How much of the 7.7 is new funding then?
It's all new funding to us, all but the 2.3 is new funding from the fiscal framework. The 2.3 million is going to be a transfer from PSPC.
Okay, so about 5.5 million to support the Deputy Prime Minister. Do the assets and the resources not already exist across the country that we have to add this expense?
So there's a couple things. So first, I'd clarify it's not just for the Deputy Prime Minister's support. There was a list of a number of items. And so part of this is continuing.
Would you provide the committee with a breakdown of those items?
I'd be happy to provide a breakdown to the committee.
Great. I'm going to move on. Question regarding the employee satisfaction survey. I noticed it's in your departmental results and your plan. Now it shows 41% of public service employees surveyed stated that they viewed the workplace as psychologically unhealthy. And I'm curious, why is there no money put aside in the SUPs or even the mains to address this?
And unfortunately, Mr. McCauley, it's a great question, but we have no more time for the answer. So what I would ask that if the answer could be provided as quickly as possible in writing to our clerk, I would appreciate it greatly. We'll now go to our next intervener, Mr. Drouin, for 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, et je tiens à remercier tous nos témoins qui sont.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank all of the witnesses who are here in front of us. I've lost the sound. The interpreter apologizes, but I've pressed the wrong button somewhere. Okay, so I was wondering, what are these $54.2 million going to be used for?
The first portion of it we've allocated to the Public Health Agency of Canada to continue their successful public health campaign. So 10 million of that 49.5 will go to public health. We also are going to provide 12 million of that to extend the Finance Canada campaign, which is currently at $10 million, to promote the economic supports for businesses and individuals across the country.
I'm sorry, is that with regards to the NCC?
No, that part didn't come through. I apologize.
Okay, yeah,
I'm PCO.
Yeah, so I was just wondering about the 52.4 million for the NCC, and presumably it probably be a PSPC question.
Sorry, my apologies, Chair. That was I missed the first part of the question because I was switching over to a different mic. So yeah, the NCC money is for largely to do repair and maintenance, damage from floods, some deferred maintenance that exists. So that's the big part of it. A number of properties, bridges, as well as a few parks. So that's grosso modo. That's the buckets of things you're looking at there. Apologies for missing the first part of the question.
Yeah, and just in terms of the bridges, I know, and I have to ask, I know that there was some, the Alexandria Bridge was in the news, and I know I have a lot of constituents who actually work for you, Mr. Matthews, and they do have to cross the bridge in order to get to you. I know in Budget 2019, we announced some dollars going directly to revamp the study of potentially a sixth link to the bridge. I'm just wondering, where are we on that?
So the money you're looking at that I referred to in supplementary estimates are actually for the Portage and Champlain Bridge.
Yep.
The money that was previously allocated has indeed gone towards revamping or refreshing, I should say, the study that was previously done. That study's not quite final yet, but should be shortly, but the study's ongoing.
And are we expecting completely different results from the 2013 study? Are they going to use sort of the same weighted averages for certain, like put more emphasis on environment, put more emphasis on certain locations? Are we expecting a completely different result? And I suppose you're going to say, well, wait till we see what the study says.
I'll give you a partial answer, Mr. Chair. Yeah. The weighting for the study will be the same as it was previously, but obviously things have changed in the years that have passed. So there may be different factors at play, but the actual factors that are being used for the study are the same factors that were used the first time around. It's just a question really of assessing what else has changed.
Okay, and I'm just going to bridge back to the 52.4 million. Obviously, that's been in the news about the official residence renovations. Are any of those funds dedicated to the official residence renovations?
No, the money in supplementary estimates A is not for official residence. It is for flood damage, as I mentioned before, some bridges and some parks, as well as some deferred maintenance and other properties.
And do we know the assessed damage from on NCC property? And I know I've seen some work going on. I have the benefit of living around here. What were the damages assessed to approximately? Do we have a number for that, or?
You're talking about damages from the flood, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I'd have to get back to you, Mr. Chair. We can do that in writing, though. That's an easy follow-up, I think.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And just finally, I think I probably have time for one more question. With regards to official residence renovations, we know that it's never a big political seller, but how does PSPC and perhaps NCC would plan to forecast similar situations going forward, whether it's for the official residences or other properties that we have around the National Capital Region?
I think, Mr. Chair, the answer depends on the project. So obviously you would do an assessment, you would make a plan, and then budget accordingly. And obviously the money can't get spent until it's been properly approved and the project has the blessing and the dollars have been put through this committee, et cetera. So can't really give you a solid answer on that front.
If I could interrupt, Mr. Matthews, and I apologize for that. Could you move your microphone just slightly away from your mouth? We're getting a bit of a feedback. That should work.
That should work? Okay. Is that better, Mr. Chair?
It's much better.
Thank you. So to answer the question in terms of future planning for official residences, better question for the National Capital Commission in terms of what they would bring forward. But obviously the grand headlines would be do an assessment, plan a project, get blessing of the funding, and then you would see them through the estimates. But there's nothing in these estimates for official residences.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to Madame Vignola. 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, bonjour. Merci, monsieur.
Hello, Mr. Matthews, and hello, everybody, and everybody else who's here today. I would like to look at with you today the National Strategy for Medical Research. We're talking about $406 million that have been set aside for therapies, all kinds of biomaterials and vaccines and everything else. So out of that amount, up until now, how much has already been set aside or already dedicated?
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of PSPC and the $500 million that is being sought through these estimates, We are basically planning to spend that money on things like charters, some PPE equipment, logistics support, both in overseas as well as in Canada, and then some respiratory care units as well. So it's largely already in the works is the answer through contracts.
D'accord. Et en proportion,
Okay. And what is the proportion of that amount that is going back to Canada?
500 million we're seeking. I cannot give an exact answer because time will tell in terms of how it gets spent. The vast majority of PPE that was purchased initially was coming from overseas. Obviously, contracts for in-country logistics, as well as some support for some overseas logistics, but the majority would be international.
I was really talking about research, therapy, vaccines, bio manufacturing, not PPE and stuff like that. I'm really talking about that $406 million that was for the National Strategy for Medical Research. Out of that category, has that already been put into research into vaccines, for instance? And how much, what is the proportion of that amount that is being spent in Canada?
That question is better asked to a different department. PSPC is only here on the 500 million for PPE, but the questions the member is asking are probably better suited for Public Health Agency or Health Canada.
Mr. Chair, it's Lisa Setliqui here from PCO. I agree with what my colleague, Mr. Matthews, just said, that these questions are better addressed to other departments, but I can say that some of the money has been allocated to organizations like SHRC, the Social Science and Humanities Research Council, as well as the Canadian Institute for Health Research. So that money is being deployed to conduct a variety of research, which I couldn't give full details on that, but vaccines is part of that roster of research. So that money is being deployed towards efforts like that.
au Canada ou à l'étranger?
In Canada or outside?
So I couldn't tell you what the proportion is, but there is lots that is happening in Canada.
Okay, Monsieur.
Mr. Lukiski, do I have any time left?
Okay, je vous remercie.
Thank you. So I'm going to go with my other issues. So funds. PSPC is asking for extra money for functioning costs. So we're talking about $203.46 million for the appropriations 1A. So how are these appropriations going to help to be used for payment processes in the government?
Pour la question.
Thank you for this question, Mr. Chairman. We have a long-term plan to support stabilization efforts for payment and human resources, including salaries for civil servants who have been hired to help in our efforts. We also have money set aside for stabilization of the system itself, as well as for funds to help with and work with other ministries and departments when it comes to data input and human resources. Thank you. So you've said extra civil servants have been hired. How many extra people have been hired for the COVID efforts? In regard to the payment system? Well, since Phoenix was set up, we had about 550 people. And now there are more than 2,500, so about 2,000 people. So 2,000 people extra that were not accounted for previously. Okay. So the situation with the COVID, has this harmed data processing in any way, or the payment problems with Phoenix? Has it actually improved things? All options are possible here.
later that we'll have to get you to respond to that question in writing directly to our clerk because we're completely out of time. My apologies. Now we'll go to Mr. Blakey for 6 minutes again. Mr. Blakey, good to see you again. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to be back with you. I did want to ask, with respect to the advertising money for the PCO, I'm curious to know how much of that money will be spent for developing advertising products in-house, and how much of that government envisions contracting out to private companies.
So I don't have a breakdown for you, and I can get that. I can get that to the committee. I will say that there is a $2.9 million of the funding towards the PCO COVID response team, and part of that team, we work with our behavioral sciences folks in PCO. We work with our own in-house team to be able to work with both Public Health Agency of Canada, Finance Canada as well on the ad campaigns. But every ad campaign that we do with the Government of Canada, we do use the agency of record to place the media buys, which is cassette media. So we do use them on a regular basis for all of the buys that we do. But I could get back to you on what the in-house capacity is. Public Health Agency of Canada and Finance have teams that work on advertising with us very closely.
Sure, I would appreciate a breakdown, particularly with respect to the money that's being requested here in the supplementary estimates. I did also want to ask, I know that it's the government's ad policy that ad campaigns over $250,000 are reviewed by a third party. There are exemptions in some cases for emergent public health advertising campaigns. But the request, even just in the supplementary estimates, is larger than the 250,000 threshold by a couple orders of magnitude. So I'm wondering what the opinion of the government is with respect to these advertising dollars and the campaigns that they'll fund, whether those are campaigns that the government would submit to third-party review or not.
So yes, in fact, you're correct. The $250,000 threshold is the threshold above which they have to go to the ASC, but many departments can use the ASC for ad campaigns that are below that threshold as well, and quite often we find that happening. And I would submit that for the Public Health Agency of Canada advertising and the finance advertising, we have gone to the ASC for both of those.
Okay,
we will likely continue to do that for the campaigns.
Thank you very much. I did also want to ask, with respect to the advertising campaigns. Largely these have been PSAs about COVID. My understanding from your remarks today is that this new money is meant to continue those campaigns. What techniques are you using to evaluate the success of those advertising dollars and see if people are getting value for money with respect to those campaigns? I know you had mentioned earlier that you've seen some success, and we're taking credit for some of the awareness about social distancing measures and other things like that. How do you know that? What metrics do you use?
Yeah, we are mandated to do evaluations of all of the campaigns that we put out using the what's called the ASET process, and all departments use this. So I did mention the metric earlier that the recall rate on the advertising was 85%. And just to give you an idea of what that means when we go out and research this after the fact, we can ask Canadians, have you seen this ad? And the recall rate is 85%, and that compares to previous years at 34% for Government of Canada advertising. So we're seeing that, and that's roughly 34 for the past 2 fiscal years. So we're seeing that advertising being recalled very, very well. And of course, if you encounter advertising that doesn't work quite well, it gives you an opportunity to adjust your future campaigns.
Thank you. With my remaining time, I want to ask some questions of PSPC and the money for Phoenix. I know in response to my colleagues' earlier questions, you had gone back and kind of mentioned the difference between staffing levels at the beginning of the Phoenix pay system and staffing levels now. But I'm curious to know, what specifically will the new money being requested in these supplementary estimates be used for? How many staff will be hired out of this money that's being requested, and how much, if any, of this money will go to IBM?
Thank you for the question. we have been receiving funding on an annual basis since the beginning of the Phoenix issues. And so the large proportion of the salary dollars that will be coming out of these supplementary estimates will be for retention of existing staff. So we're not looking to grow the workforce exponentially more, but rather to maintain the staff that we have brought on, trained and engaged to become pay support staff. There will be funding that does go to IBM. We do have a contractual obligation with them, and the funding this year for IBM will be for last year, was about $80 million, and we are now looking to, through a request for interest, solicit inputs or bids for alternative providers through a market solicitation.
And has PIPSI been invited to bid on that work, or to put forward a proposal for how some of that work might be done in-house as opposed to going directly to third party?
There has been a lot of.
Unfortunately, again, Mr. Linklater, a second time, I apologize for interrupting, but if you could provide the rest of that answer in writing as soon as possible to our clerk, because we're now going to the next round of questioning. 5 minutes each, starting with Mrs. Block.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much to our witnesses for joining us on such a beautiful, warm day. Mr. Matthews, in these estimates, there is, as you noted in a response to one of my colleagues, $500 million in a request for funds to make payments to suppliers of PPE. Can you tell the committee what the total value of all PPE contracts entered into by PSPC is?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I cannot tell you at this stage. Frankly, it changes on a daily basis. But we are looking, the $500 million we are looking for here, Mr. Chair, is for contracts that PSPC would enter into for itself, as opposed to for clients or other departments. So it's a bit of a different ask in that respect.
Okay. Last week at committee, you provided or identified that roughly 40% of your department's contracts contained an advance payment component. Of these contracts that have this component, can you estimate for the committee what the average percentage of advance payment is?
Not without, it would be a really rough guess, but what I could say, Mr. Chair, is that it varied depending upon the period in time during which we were transacting. There was a period in March where if you were buying in 95, March and April, you were looking at 100% in some cases. Early on, that was as low as 25%, went to 50%, peaked at 100. I would say more recently, you're seeing cases where, again, for certain commodities only, you're looking at 50% seems to be the most common request, but there's a lot of back and forth.
Okay.
But it's commodity specific is what I would say as well.
Okay, thank you. Of the contracts that require an advance payment, what percentage of those are with suppliers whose manufacturing is in China?
Majority of PPE right now is still coming from overseas and China in particular. So we are still reliant on China as we look to stand up domestic capacity. We do have some coming from the U.S. as well, but majority of the contracts early on, certainly, I could ballpark it, but I would say the vast majority are coming from China.
Thank you. So what percentage of contracts with our domestic manufacturers have a prepayment component?
Again, depends on the commodity and the investment required. So if you're looking at the gown industry in particular, you would see there's a lot of requirement to get your hands on material, very competitive field to get your hands on that kind of material. So some of our suppliers who are a little bit, struggle to kind of make that initial outlay, we're seeking for advance payments as well. You would have seen some where there was large upfront investment on the ventilators. So there is some in domestic as well.
Okay, thank you. So we've understood from answers by the minister that your department is trying to extract itself from the contract with the supplier who provided us substandard KN95 masks. Are there any other contracts for PPE that the department is trying to get out of at this time?
Thanks for the question. You're right in terms of one. There's a few others that are struggling with delivery dates that are still in place, and we expect there's one other that would have some quality issues as well. Too early to say what we're going to see on that one. So to answer your question bluntly, there's still the active one we talk about. There's others that could pop up, but we're monitoring closely.
Okay, thank you. Are there any contracts that you're currently worried about their performance in terms of what you had originally hoped for and perhaps what you're seeing in deliverables?
I'd highlight two issues. One is timeliness. We've seen some where there's timeliness issues, and we're in constant communication with our suppliers to understand when delivery dates slip, what will the date be. If you're in a case where there's multiple delays, you have to start to question their ability to deliver. So there's ongoing dialogue there. On the quality front, we're always checking for quality. N95s comes up a lot, or KN95s comes up a lot. So there's a couple we're actively monitoring.
So my last question, because I imagine I'm running out of time, of the $500 million that has been requested in these estimates, how much of it has already been spent?
In terms of contract spent, in terms of out the door, I can't give you an answer, but in terms of planned contracts or contracts that are underway, majority would be under contract.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'll now go to Mr. Weiler for 5 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the witnesses from PCO and PSBC for joining our committee meeting today. My first questions relate to PCO. In your written statement, you mentioned that PCO has been leading intergovernmental efforts to coordinate federal, provincial, and territorial responses to the pandemic and to ensure information sharing among governments. What format is this communication taking, and what proportion of the overall $49 million that's been budgeted is supporting the same?
Thank you very much for the question. So I can talk a little bit about the format and how we're doing some of those intergovernmental relations. So we have a team at PCO that does have responsibility to support the Deputy Prime Minister as well as the Prime Minister in the federal, provincial, territorial relations. So during the COVID response, we have had almost daily meetings with our counterparts in the provinces and the territories, and we've also been supporting the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister at weekly meetings with all of the premiers to ensure that information is shared in a timely way. Often it's the provinces and the territories who have responsibility for healthcare to deliver some of the programs, so ensuring they have the information available to them on some of the new support programs that are coming out at the federal level, as well as to collaborate on some of the actions so that there is sort of a level of collaboration between the different orders of government.
Great. And you mentioned in your earlier remarks that part of the advertising campaign was geared towards health advice, and other parts of the advertising campaign was geared towards financial measures and working with the Department of Finance. And do you have a measure of how well specifically the campaign has informed Canadians of the federal financial supports that are available?
Yeah, I don't have the breakdown of that 85% and whether that was specific to the public health campaign or the finance campaign, but I can certainly get that to you and give you a little bit of evaluation of the finance campaign to date. We do know that that finance has committed already approximately $7.5 million in advertising for this fiscal that they've already engaged on, and a large percentage of that was in Canadian media, but on the evaluation so far, we do see that that Canadians are responding well to the CERB, for instance, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, and we're going to do some more advertising this week on the emergency wage subsidy as well to get a little more uptake on the emergency wage subsidies. But I can certainly get you some information on the evaluation of the finance campaign to date.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about the biggest item in the supplementary estimates, which is the $585 million for the construction of the 2 Protector class ships. I know these are very important to permit naval vessels to remain at sea for much longer periods of time without having to return to port for fuel and other supplies. And I'm particularly interested in this project because I've had the opportunity to visit the C-SPAN facilities in my neighboring riding where many of my constituents work. So I was hoping, this is a question more for PSPC, I was hoping you could tell me what the requested 585 million support would go towards in the construction of these ships and what the total cost of the ships is going to be.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And while PSPC is not getting any funding in these estimates for our work on the JSS Joint Support Ships, obviously we have a role. The latest announcement or contract signing brings the total cost up to $4.1 billion, and that's the current contract that's in place. So that's the update there. But is there any? If the question is there any new money in here for PSPC and for our role? No, there's no money in here for PSPC for joint support ship work.
And Mr. Matthews, a quick, your microphone seemed to have slipped down a little bit. There we go. Either up or below your mouth, one of the two. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And what was the original estimate from the PBO of the cost of the JSS?
I don't actually have the initial estimate of the PBO in front of me. I can tell you that the most recent update before this latest one was 3.4 billion, but it has been signaled as being under review for a while. And so the latest update on cost brings us up to 4.1. Great.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'll now go to Mr. Obute for 5 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you for Chair for giving me the time. I do have a question over the Canadian digital services. There was about $9 million in 2019, about $12 million for 2021, and I think maybe similar amount or bigger for 2021-22. Would you be able to explain to us what Canadian digital services does?
Mr. Chair, I'm wondering if that question is better suited for your next series of witnesses, because I believe, I'm going from memory here, and my friends from PCO may be able to help, but I believe that's more of a Treasury Board Secretariat question.
Okay, then I go back to the PPEs, Mr. Matthews, to build on the questions that came from my colleague, Ms. Block, on the contracts, the prepaid contracts. Now, how many, and how out of $500 million, how much have you been invoiced for so far?
I cannot give you an answer for invoices so far.
Why not?
I have to get back to you. Don't have the information with me, but I can see what we can do. Some of this work has not yet started. Some are recent contracts, but have to get back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Will you be able to advise us on the 9.8 million masks that they were defected? What happened to these masks?
The ones that you're flagging, Mr. Chair, or the members flagging, Mr. Chair, many of these were put into, given to other departments to be used as surgical masks because that's a lower grade. So they've been put into service, not all of them, but a good majority of them in other departments where the requirement for KN95 does not exist.
So if these were not suitable for medical use, they were suitable probably for non-medical use. Is that a correct statement?
So I think the highest standard of mask you would see, Mr. Chair, is the N95, KN95. Below that, you would have the surgical mask. A defective, if I could say, KN95 mask is still a high-grade surgical mask, and I'm being very generic in my statement here, but it is suitable for other purposes.
So 9.8 million masks. Do we know for sure how many of these were returned to market? How many were distributed to different departments for non-medical use, and how many still in the warehouses?
So of the ones that have been received in Canada, the 9.8 that the member is referencing, give or take about half, if I recall correctly, I'll confirm, have been used by other or in use by other departments. Some are still being held by PHAC, but PHAC actually has the inventory itself.
So are we getting credits for what we paid for these 9.8 million masks?
In terms of the negotiations with the supplier on the defective masks, can't comment as those conversations are ongoing, but we are still in discussions.
So we haven't settled that yet, have we?
That is still ongoing, Mr. Chair.
What's your conditions? Usually rejected products will be either credited back to the customer, or will be returned back to the supplier, or will be discarded. And then if you're to discard it, then there's a compensation that has to go back to the customer, or if it's going to be stored in warehouses, also costs money. So what are your options? What are you putting on the table there to negotiate what's going to happen to these masks?
Mr. Chair, because of the ongoing discussions, I'm not able to answer the members' questions without getting into detail that, frankly, would compromise our position.
Okay, based on the terms of the purchase order, which is usually you take some conditions before you place an order, whether you have the upper hand or you don't. And I know in this case we don't have the upper hand. What did you negotiate in terms of defective product? Would you be able to tell us?
Well, normally when you just standard government contracts, when you've got a defective product, you have an obligation or an option to actually get a product in your hand that meets the requirements. If that fails, then you're on to other options. But that's just a generic government of Canada contract approach.
But do you have the same approach for overseas supplies, such as the defective N95?
Well, Mr. Chair, the terms would depend on the contract in question. So there's a variety.
It would be nice, Mr. Matthew. I'm not asking you to. I did ask to know who's the suppliers and whether the supplier is a Canadian supplier, which is sort of a distributor, or you're dealing directly with China. Will you be able to advise us whether you're dealing through a Canadian distributor or you're dealing directly with factories?
And whatever answer you have, Mr. Matthews, I'd ask once again that you can supply that answer in writing as quickly as possible to our clerk. Now we'll go to, I believe, Mr. Kazmierczuk for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And we'll go back to the PCO. Just a couple questions here. My colleagues have done a really nice job of asking some really good questions here, but just a couple that I've got left over. How does in terms of the communications and the marketing that was budgeted, how does the federal government communicate with Canadians who don't have access to internet and don't have access to digital marketing and whatnot? Just curious.
That's an excellent question, because it actually raises a very good point that advertising and paid advertising is only one way we communicate with Canadians. So we, in using the paid advertising, we do use, for instance, Public Health Agency of Canada early on had a mail out that we actually sent to all Canadians. We also use what we call out of home, so billboards, for instance, that you would see driving down the highway. We still use, believe it or not, bus billboards as well that you would see. So it's a campaign that we try to hit as many Canadians as we can, including Indigenous Canadians where they may not be they may be up north and may not have access, as you say, to the internet like others might. Obviously, how you target your specific campaign will depend on what it is you're trying to get across. But in this particular case, both the public health messaging on the safety and security of Canadians and the finance messaging were really of interest to most Canadians. In fact, if not all Canadians. So we used a variety of methods.
So it really was a comprehensive approach and multifaceted in terms of getting the information out. Okay.
Absolutely.
Excellent. I do have a question for PSPC regarding the spending the budgeted amount for Phoenix. So when I'm looking at the numbers, I mean, I'm seeing a tremendous reduction of cases, 64%, down from 384,000 to 137,000 pay transactions. So I just wanted to ask you, why are these additional funds required if the workload is going down?
Thank you for the question. And in fact, while we have made significant progress, there does remain a great deal of work to be done. As I mentioned in response to an earlier question, we have been receiving funding on an annual basis. And so the funding that is in the estimates will allow us to maintain the staff that we have and to advance our efforts. while ensuring that we can speed up the technological enhancements and fixes that the system requires, while continuing to work with departments and agencies around the timeliness and the accuracy of the HR information that's entered into the systems that then manifest themselves in pay action. So we have made significant progress, but with a 50% reduction in the backlog, we still need to continue to pursue and double down on our efforts to continue that progress.
Okay, thank you very much. And I am going to bounce around a little bit here with my questions. As I said, my colleagues previously have answered or asked and answered most of the questions that I had coming in here. Regarding the $500 million that was set aside for PPE and whatnot, do we have an estimate of how much more PPE we will need to procure? Do we have a sense of how much more we'll have to procure?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. That's actually a very important question, but better asked to colleagues at Health Canada and Public Health Agency in terms of modeling and what might be coming. I can share with the chair that the goods are going up in terms of reserves across the country, but can I say we're done or when will we be done? I cannot say. I'm sorry.
Okay, so this is an ongoing process then, and constantly reevaluating, and like you said, the modeling changes, I imagine.
It depends on what comes next, and
Right.
we foresee ourselves being in this business for a while.
Okay, and how does our spending compare to other similar countries? Have we sort of looked at, is that even a valid comparison to look at what other countries are doing, or do we just simply focus on what the demand is here locally?
Interesting question, Mr. Chair. Again, better asked to colleagues at Health Canada, but we're just executing here. But Health Canada and Public Health Agency may have a better sense of the comparators and whether they're meaningful. I'm afraid I can't offer anything useful on that question.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to 2.5-minute interventions, starting with Monsieur Bassirou-Duval.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My first question may be for the Privy Council. On March 26th, the Trudeau government was talking about, according to an article I read, that it needed $30 million for advertising on COVID. On March 26th, that was the hottest and most intense period of the pandemic. Why are we now being asked for $48 million in the supplementary estimates? I'm wondering what's going on that's so huge compared to what was going on back then. Is that the real budget? Are the budgets higher now than they were at the time?
So, Mr. Chair, as mentioned earlier, the unprecedented nature of COVID-19 with both the economic side and the public health imperative has meant that we need to give information to Canadians as widely as we can. To give you just an example, in 2009, 2010, when we last saw the economic impact with the crisis and then the H1N1, government spent about $136 million in advertising that year. And we're seeing that this year, we're likely to spend about $120 million in advertising from the government this year by the end of 2021. So as we know, the crisis is not over, and the public health $30 million that went out early on was forecasted to actually get the news to Canadians. And I think at the time, March 26th, we were getting into the stay home, stay safe
Merci,
time.
je vais vous couper parce que j'aurais besoin.
Thank you. I'm going to cut you off because I need more time to ask you a second question. I'm not convinced about the explanation you've given me on this, but if I continue with another question, it's because the Quebec government announced quasi-exclusivity of the amounts spent were for local media. Your level of government also said that it'll be in Canadian media. When I open local newspapers, I see 2 or 3 big ads from the Quebec government. I see nothing from the federal government. Where did the money go? Did it go to Google and Facebook? Where would we get a breakdown of that? And what do you do?
Well, but unfortunately, we have no time for the answer. I would ask the response be given in writing as quickly as possible to our clerk. And we will go to our final intervention, 2.5 minutes to Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And following up on that question, it was a great question, my friend from the block, regarding a breakdown and how hopefully the performance indicators will be able to report to us where this money went. And I'm wondering, does your department use the GBA Plus? And if so, how do you track where the plus goes in terms of these procurement investments in advertising?
So on the advertising, we do know that the Public Health Agency of Canada, more than 80% of that placement were in Canadian media, 16% in print media, including dailies, weeklies, ethnic and Aboriginal newspapers. So,
do you have breakdowns of that line by line?
I can certainly provide that breakdown. Absolutely.
I would love to have that breakdown, as would my friend. It appears from the block as it relates to the French language advertisements in the province of Quebec, and of course all the Francophone communities across the country. And what is your mandate when you do the GBA Plus? What policies do you have in place to ensure that the equity, diversity, and inclusion of your procurement, your stated procurement policies, are reflected in the contracts that you procure?
I imagine you're asking that question to my colleague at PSPC for procurement for government-wide. Is that?
Well, for the advertisement specifically, I have a whole other motion coming for PSPC.
Understood.
But for today, as it relates to all the money you were just talking about,
yeah.
How do we know that it's getting equally or equitably, I should say, distributed across all communities?
Again, when you're looking at an advertising campaign, you want to make sure that you're targeting to get the desired impact of that advertising campaign. And in many cases, it's going to be through ethnic media, if that's what you're looking at. For instance, if you're targeting a youth, something for the youth, you may go digital, and you may.
That's the sound. I'm sorry. It sounds to me that's the how. What I'm interested in is the what. Like, what have you done in this campaign to ensure that has happened? What policy can you point to, or what target or goals has your department set to meet the standard of gender-based analysis plus?
Well, I think I would like to get back to you on specifically for the Public Health Agency of Canada campaign and their lens with GBA Plus, as well as finance campaign, because I don't have that information with me today.
Well, as my chair will say, I look forward to having it received in writing at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. I will now excuse our witnesses, both from PSC and PSPC. Thank you very much for your appearances here. You have been, as always, informative and helpful, and you are excused. Colleagues, I will be suspending in just a few moments, but before I do, we'll remain in public because I do have one item I would like to go over with you, and that is the draft budget that all of you will have received from our clerk. This is for the additional costs we have incurred from conducting these Zoom meetings. We're asking for an approval of $6,000. That will be a maximum amount. I don't think personally that we'll spend that much, but the majority of that, approximately $4,500, is for the establishment of the phone lines, which are required for our Zoom meetings, and $1,500 are for the headsets, which we have been distributing to our witnesses, so our audio levels are as good as they can be. And colleagues, if you have any questions, please virtually raise your hand. Otherwise, I would prefer to go directly to the question and ask for your approval for this amount. First, are there any questions?
So moved.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKinnon. I will now ask the clerk to go through the roll call to seek the approval of the $6,000 budget. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The budget, of course, is for the study of the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. As part of that study, a total budget amount of $6,000. Mr. Drouin.
En faveur.
Mr. Johari.
Approved.
Mr. Kusmirchak.
Support.
Mr. McKinnon.
Oui.
Mr. Weiler.
Approved.
Mr. Abultiev.
Yes.
Ms. Block.
Yes.
Mr. McCauley.
Agreed, thanks.
Madame Vignola.
Oui.
Mr. Green.
Support.
That is 10 in favor, none against, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That motion is carried. Colleagues, I will now suspend for just a few moments while our clerk and our technicians do sound checks for our second panel of witnesses. A reminder to all of you that we have not received speaking notes for the Department of Finance or the Treasury Board Secretariat, so both those departments will be making short 5-minute opening statements, and we will commence as soon as we have completed our sound checks. We are suspended.
very happy to be here today to answer the committee's questions on the 2020-21 Supplementary Estimates A. As committee members know, each year, the government tables 2 or 3 supplementary estimates which outline incremental spending plans to the main estimates. The current Supplementary Estimates A, tabled by the President on June 2nd, 2020, seeks approval of funding that is incremental to the 2021 main estimates which were tabled this past February and which parliamentarians are currently studying. These supplementary estimates present information on spending requirements across federal organizations that were either not sufficiently developed in time for inclusion in the main estimates or have since been updated to reflect new developments. In addition to summarizing the government's incremental financial requirements, these estimates also provide an overview of major funding requests and horizontal initiatives. The information in the supplementary estimates ensures continued transparency and accountability on the use of public funds to deliver programs and services to Canadians. These documents give parliamentarians and this committee the opportunity to review and consider these spending amounts in advance of approving them. They bring forward $6 billion in operating and capital expenditures, grants and contributions to be voted by Parliament for 42 federal organizations. Among these are public health and economic responses to the unprecedented impact of COVID-19 pandemic, supporting and providing Indigenous peoples across the country the disability insurance plan for public service and air travel security screening. Karen Cahill, Assistant Secretary and Chief Financial Officer for the Treasury Board Secretariat, and my colleague Marcia Santiago are happy to answer questions on any items should committee members have any. In total, in these supplementary estimates, voted spending measures represent about 5% increase over those included in the 2020-21 main estimates tabled this winter. As you may recall, the 2020-21 main estimates requested the authority to spend $125 billion in voted budgetary expenditures and $87 billion in voted non-budgetary expenditures. We also continue to publish information on statutory spending in these estimates. This ensures that all Canadians have the most complete information available on the planned spending of appropriation-dependent organizations. For information purposes, these supplementary estimates include forecasts of statutory expenditures totaling $81 billion. These statutory expenditures forecasts provide information on emergency spending that was authorized by Parts 3 and 8 of the COVID-19 Emergency Response Acts, which were presented, debated, and passed in Parliament in March and April. Parliament is not being asked to vote on them again in Supplementary Estimates A. Mr. Chair, it's important to be clear on the difference between voted and statutory expenditures. And I mentioned this a couple months ago when I was at the committee walking through how we map out the supply calendar. Voted expenditures require annual approval from Parliament through an appropriation bill. This means that parliamentarians consider and approve the government's proposed spending plans in the estimates documents before they are authorized in an appropriation bill. Statutory amounts, on the other hand, are presented in the estimates for information because they've already been approved by Parliament through other legislation. To support transparency and accountability in government spending, significant additional detail on these supplementary estimates is available online. The government's online information tools reflect a commitment to give Canadians a clear explanation of where public funds are going and how they're being spent. As my colleagues Alison McDermott and Soren Halverson from the Department of Finance can attest, the Minister of Finance is committed to report on a bi-weekly basis to the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance on the key actions taken by the government to help Canadians. Finally, as usual, the government will report on actual spending through the public accounts after the conclusion of the fiscal year. Again, I realize members are eager to get to the questions, so I will leave it there and happy to receive them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My understanding is we do not have an opening statement from our representatives from Finance, In that case, we'll go directly to questions, and I think we can go with our full 6-minute rounds, 5-minute rounds, and 2.5-minute rounds. We'll start off with Mr. McCauley for 6 minutes, please.
Great, thank you, witnesses. Mr. Purvis, good to see you back. Quick question. Earlier committee, we heard from PCO saying that half of their $50 million advertising ask was for future use without an exact plan in case something came up from COVID. They said it went through TBS approval. Why did that not go through a vote 5? Like, it's a textbook definition of why it should be the vote 5 from TBS.
Sorry, are you referring to PCO funding being
25 million. They said it passed through TBS approval for a plan for advertising spending that they actually didn't have a plan for. It was just held in reserve, basically, if something came up with COVID. Why would the Treasury Board not put that into a vote 5?
Why would it not put it into a vote 5, or why did it?
Why didn't it? Why did it not? Curious how it got past Treasury Board and not put into a vote 5.
Well, I think in this instance, certainly vote 5 is being considered for government contingencies where departments are not able to actually provide funding and support for certain initiatives. Okay. And so I think maybe what
PCO, I'll do, I'll ask you to take a look at that specific one, and maybe you can get back to the committee why Treasury Board approved it when they didn't actually have a plan for the money. I'm going to get to something else, please. When we had PBO with us last week, we talked about the leave code 699 in Treasury Board, and we had asked Treasury Board about it. And I understand that you are, we asked PBO about it. I understand Treasury Board is following up with PBO about it. I'm just wondering, are you going to meet the PBO deadline for providing this info? And also, if you would be able to provide the aggregate info to this committee as well on the use of Code 699.
I think to be expeditious in terms of this appearance, we can undertake to get back to you on that question, Mr. McCauley.
Good. Well, I'm asking if you would commit to providing this committee with the aggregate info on the use of the 699.
I think we'll commit to getting back on the question first and foremost.
Okay. Well, I think you might be pushing our hand another way, but thanks. In the SUPs, there's the pay list requirements, the $82,500,000.
Correct.
Now, what clause got amended, I guess, in one of the collective agreements that brought this about, and who benefited, and over what period of time is this money for?
So, as committee members might know, pay list is for change in terms and conditions for employment. It's for maternity and paternity leave. It's for recognition of.
I'm aware. I'm just asking what's the breakdown of the 82.5
It's for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation in terms of recognition of the collective agreement that they concluded. And to provide
is that
funds
just pure? Can you give us a breakdown, please, of that 82.5? What makes it up? Whether it's pure salary, pension adjustments, money for other amendments? Would you provide that to committee, please?
We can undertake to get back to you on that.
Can you provide it to committee?
We can undertake to get back to the committee on that, yes.
Why would are you trying to say you will let us know if you'll provide that?
We'll
or
get
will
back
you provide
to the committee?
You'll provide that to us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Next question, the disability insurance plan, the $395,800,000. Now, I know generally what that is about. I'm just wondering if you could provide a breakdown. How much is due to added public service employees? How much is added benefits they're receiving? Is it changed in actuarial numbers?
I'll let my colleague Karen Cahill answer that one.
Great, and Karen, part of the follow-up question, we asked PCO in the employee engagement survey, 40% of all public servants say they're working in a psychologically unhealthy environment. How much is this contributing to our added costs in the disability insurance plan?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. In effect, the $395.8 million that we're asking under the disability insurance plan is to cover two things: a lump sum payment of $320 million that we have committed to the insurer, to reimburse the insurer for. And this is mainly to reestablish the health of the plan. As per the Office of the Financial Institution, OSFI, we need to keep a 40% surplus to keep our plan in good health. So this is to contribute to that.
Okay, what's the balance?
The balance would be a lump sum which is to account for an increase of to 20% in the payment. So as you know, it's 15%.
How much of this 395 million, how much is it from an increase in the amount of FTEs in the public service, and how much is, again, to increase use of this disability fund, again, looping back to 40% of the public servants saying they're working in a psychologically unhealthy work environment?
So we have many factors.
Unfortunately, since we're completely out of time, I would ask that you provide that answer to Mr. McCauley's question once again in writing as quickly as possible, and submit that please to our clerk. We'll now go to our second round. Mr. Kazmierczak, I have you down. I'm not sure if it's going to be you or Mr. Shuhari.
Nope, you are correct, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. And so the question that I have is, how was the COVID-19 pandemic taken into account in these estimates? And do you know what proportion of this funding is devoted to measures addressing COVID-19?
Sure, I could handle that. So of these estimates include 81 billion in statutory support that is not being voted on in Parliament. And so this is support that effectively we provide, and we provide detail on it for transparency purposes, because we always provide, in terms of the main estimates plan for the 122 organizations that are appropriation dependent, we always provide updates on any changes on the statutory supports for these 122 organizations. As a consequence of that, of the 81 billion, almost entirely, except for about 100 million, is directed towards COVID supports. And that 81 billion is a subset of the items that are contained in the Minister of Finance's report that is tabled on a bi-weekly basis in FINA. And so we took that report and we worked with our finance colleagues to make sure that we were, as of May 29th, getting the best and clearest picture possible about what elements of that support factor in specifically into those 122 organizations and that we can report on in these supplementary estimates. So that's the statutory side. On the voted side, as I mentioned, the budgetary voted amount is 6 billion. Of that amount, there's 1.3 billion that is directed towards COVID-19 supports. And as you go through the document and all the items, you will see effectively COVID-19 in brackets. It's not something we normally do, but effectively what we've done is earmarked all the items that are for COVID-19 supports so that parliamentarians and Canadians can actually look at it when they go online.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. Thank you very much for that rundown. In the allocations, TBS allocated 0.3 million to the Canada Border Service Agency and $0.4 million to the Canada Revenue Agency under Vote 10 to assess their inventory of legacy applications and build technical capacity to support their migration into more secure, modern data centers or cloud services. Just wanted to ask why TBS used this type of vote for that allocation.
So Vote 10 is used effectively in circumstances where an item goes to Treasury Board, it's approved by Treasury Board, there's a clear line of sight as to what the initiatives are, there's a clear line of sight on the amounts, but it's unclear precisely which departmental vote is going to be allocated certain funding. So these are government-wide initiatives. And so in these instances, application modernization initiative is a government-wide initiative, and it applies to a whole host of different departments. But it's not until the departments themselves actually are able to identify how much they're going to identify and collect of the amount that that they're able to get it. And so from that standpoint, it's very important to have an operating vote that's a central vote like that you can actually distribute to the system broadly, which has effectively that line of sight. The other aspect of that is Phoenix damages. There's LGBTQ supports. These are a lot of supports that you don't know precisely which departments are going to receive what amounts, and so it's important to be able to have that central vote to be able to distribute accordingly.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And just a follow-up question on that: has the COVID-19 pandemic motivated this assessment and migration to more secure and modern data centers and cloud services? Is that something that was an ongoing project? Was it accelerated by the COVID pandemic? Just curious if you could shed some light on that.
Actually, I don't know whether it actually has shed some light on that issue. I think that is an issue that would probably be best carried by our colleagues at Shared Services. But I don't know, Karen, if you have a position on that or if a perspective to share on that from that standpoint.
Thank you. I would suggest that we ask our colleagues at SSC, as they are responsible for the whole of the infrastructure. As a department, we have done a lot of work towards moving to cloud services, but every department is a bit different, and SSC is coordinating this initiative.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And Chair, how much time do I have? I'm seeing your finger sort of
yes,
inching towards the mute button.
The fickle finger of you're out of time. So
Thank you.
we will now go to Madame Vignola for 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Oh no.
Trésor, en ce sens que, bon, ben, vous êtes un peu les grands argentiers. Et je me demandais qu'est-ce qu'il y avait de plus intéressant pour un pays en termes d'économie, de finances, d'efficacité, entre on attend la dernière minute pour remplacer un bateau et ce qui nous oblige à le louer ou à l'acheter à l'extérieur.
Ms. Vignola.
On l'achète
Madame,
ici.
Pardon-moi.
Oui.
Mr. Clerk, I'm not sure about anyone else. I am not here. I'm on the English channel, but I'm not hearing any English translation from Madame Vignola's commentary. I wonder if we could suspend for just a moment to get the clerks to check that.
Hi.
Technicians to check that,
Madame
please.
This is Yuko, the interpreter.
Pour s'assurer que vous êtes sur le canal en français.
Oui, je suis sur le canal français.
Yes, I'm on the French channel. Okay.
And I want to talk with our technical people. There is a problem with the line seem to have been crossed. One moment, please. Okay, Mr. Chair, if you can try it again. I think the mic has been, I think it's been fixed, the issue, so you may continue. Excuse me.
Thank you, Madame. I will not obviously dock you any time for that, so perhaps you could resume.
Yes. Can you hear me well now? Is the interpretation happening? Yes.
Ah, super, c'est moi qui entends.
Okay, I'm the one who doesn't hear you anymore. Okay, that's fine. So, can I start over, Mr. Lukinski?
Please go ahead. Start over. Can you hear me?
Maintenant, oui.
Now I do, yes, thank you. Okay, my question is this. For the finances of a country, what's better in terms of savings and finances and efficiency or effectiveness, not just in the short term, but in the long term, between one, waiting till the last minute to replace infrastructure, where there's naval infrastructure or real property or anything else, or two, have a replacement plan and make sure that instead of going at the last minute and buying somewhere else or having it done at the last minute, perhaps with less good materials when it comes to real property. But I'm going to concentrate on a ship here. We have no choice. We're at the last minute, or we build it here. We give some jobs to people here. Which one is the winning formula in the long term for any given country?
Mr. Purvis, I'm not sure if you're answering, but if you are, you're on mute.
Apologies. Maybe I should start. I think that's certainly a question that's kind of outside my swim lane with respect to looking through the supplementary estimates A in particular. It carries with it many questions about priorities. There's the economic side. There's the strategic side. But I don't know if it's one that is best suited for me to answer as opposed to potentially defense or PSPC, actually, Bill Matthews and company, who are just there.
So in many cases then, authorization has to come from Treasury Board for spending. We see increased shipbuilding because there's delays. Decisions have to be made, unfortunately, that go against the national strategy on shipbuilding and Canadian building, I should say, Canadian production. So I'm wondering, what is the position of Treasury Board on that? Seeing spending increase, isn't there a brake that has to be applied somewhere so that budgets are respected here? Considering what's agreed upon at the outset?
Well, certainly items that go through Treasury Board, they get the rigor and the assessment on a case-by-case basis. In terms of the status of that project in particular and so forth, the Treasury Board position on a particular issue is often subject to cabinet confidence. In terms of the government and where the government is with respect to the next stage of investment on the Joint Ships Initiative, there is the funding in the main estimate or in the supplementary estimates directed towards that initiative. But again, I think for the most part, questions about timelines, questions about consideration of priorities and so forth would probably be best directed towards the Department of Defense or PSPC, those that are actively managing those initiatives.
All right, so I'll stay with the estimates and costs. What are the estimated costs of the polar icebreaker ship? I know you're talking about defense and so on, but where are those costs now?
Effectively, so that would be under that would be fisheries.
Mr. Purvis,
and
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Again. Could you please keep your microphone about 2 inches in front of your mouth? The interpreters are having a bit of a difficult time.
Sure. Is that better? So, as you know, the estimates, they include $6.6 million for the polar icebreaker project. They ensure marine traffic moves safely in and through. 6.6 million is, of course, is the capital portion for the funding for the polar icebreaker project. Under the page for Department of Fisheries and Oceans.
Yes, but that 6.6 million is the current price or all the delays that could happen if a certain consortium, they already...
We talk about the initiatives, when we're talking about specifically the broader project for the polar icebreaker initiative and so forth, Department of Fisheries and Oceans would be best placed to answer those questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Colleagues, Mr. Green unfortunately had to leave us, and his request, which could only be, I think, put under the category of strange bedfellows, he has asked that his time be given to Mr. McCauley. So, Mr. McCauley, you have 6 minutes, please.
That's strange bedfellows. It's colleagues looking for transparency. Mr. Purvis, I just want to get back to you. I kind of cut you off there earlier. The discussion on the $25 million, PCO received, $50 million, went through the Treasury Board process.
Right.
They stated about 25 million, 22 million, around there was for future use with no real planned use. It was kind of a just in case things changed with COVID, used for advertising. I'm curious, again, how did that get through Treasury Board approval and not put into a vote 5 for like contingency use when they actually didn't have an actual plan for it apart from, well, things change in COVID, we've got this in our back pocket?
So, Mr. McCauley, just so I understand, and I'm going to bring my microphone here.
For Tom, interrupt you again.
Just so I understand the question. So, Treasury Board Vote 5 is circumstances where
contingency
where
fund,
a department has the payment. It's an urgent payment they have to make,
right?
And they don't have the authority, sufficient authorities within their vote to be able to make that payment. Right?
Yeah, I understand that. But what PCO had said is they've got 50 million, of which only 25 million they have plans for. The other, we're going to sit on it until we have a future use for it. And that's what I can't wrap my head around, puny as my brain is, about how they got authorization for, again, funding through the Treasury Board system where they don't actually have a plan for that apart from if something comes up.
Well, my understanding is that there's 4 uses for that funding. It's for public health information, financial support for individuals, financial support for businesses.
I recognize that, but they told us in this committee meeting that, well, half of it's for future use we don't have a plan for in case things change with COVID. I'm just wondering if that's meets Treasury Board guidelines.
No, I think
again, it's about
certainly
asking Parliament to approve money that they don't actually have a plan for, really.
Obviously there's always a plan for certain amounts, that the amounts that go through Treasury Board, and that's what Treasury Board ministers do. They scrutinize these items and they move on, and if the timing works, then they go into the next supplementary estimates, right? And that's effectively what's happened in this instance, is that it's gone through the voted payment authority path for the full amount. It may be that I don't know. I didn't hear what they said. But
I'll wrap up and I'll move back.
But if I could just say,
and I'll move on to a different thing. I'll go back. I think it was Ms. Cahill. We were talking about the 395.8 million for the disability insurance plan. Is that how much of an increase of public service employees using or accessing this plan? What's a year-over-year increase? And how much is our increase in cost of premiums?
So the increase in cost of premiums, the premiums is increasing to 20% rate. That represents for a public servant with an average salary of $75,000. It's for $1.50 a month.
Okay, is there a increase from the amount of employees accessing this fund?
There
So what
is
is that?
so I would need to follow up on the exact number of the increase, but definitely we have seen an increase in employee accessing the disability insurance. There's also other factors with respect to the increase that we're requesting. One of them is we have negotiated salary collective agreements. So increase in salary would bear an increase into the disability insurance plan,
but
as
pretty
it's an
marginally.
insurance.
What I would assume the largest amount is more people accessing the plan. But you said you get back to us. Maybe you could let us know.
Yes, we will. We will.
And I just have one last quick question. There's a vote 5 use of rounded up $11 million for CRTC that Treasury Board transferred over. Provide financial assistance to broadcasters facing declines in revenue. Where exactly is that 11 million going? Who's it going to? Like, it's going to CRTC, but obviously they presented to Treasury Board where that money's getting used if they're accessing the contingency. Where's it going exactly?
Sure. So that money is being used to address the immediate operational challenges.
Right. I've got that from your allotments or your allocations page, but for what though?
Well, effectively,
they would have presented a plan to Treasury Board to access this. Where's it going?
But when broadcasting licenses fees come off, that means that the revenues they're bringing in is less, which means that they need an offset to go and to cover expenses that would normally be covered by these fees.
It says to Canadian broadcasters. It's your allocations page says that 11 million is going to Canadian broadcasters.
So it's offsetting revenue shortfalls caused by the reduction of broadcasting license fees.
Yeah, these fee reductions. So we're reducing fees to. Oh, so we're actually CRTC is writing off fees to broadcasters, and it would appear, and this is making up for the difference.
Broadcasting fees reduced. As a consequence, there's a revenue shortfall there.
So we're making up for the shortfall.
As a consequence of, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I understand. Thanks, Mr. Purpose.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll now go to our 5-minute round, starting with Mr. Abutev.
Yes, good afternoon to both Department of Finance and Treasury Board. The commercial rent assistance, is that a part of the $81 billion that allocated for COVID-19?
That is part of the 81 billion.
How much have you budgeted for the commercial rent assistance?
Maybe I'll pass this on to one of my finance colleagues, just given its support under the statutory authority under the Emergency Response Act. So Allison, I see her hand up there.
Well, I have can you hear me? I have the amounts at my disposal, but I would turn to my colleague Soren for more questions about the program. We have estimated the total impact of that at 2.974 billion.
2.974 billion. That's over a period of how many months?
Soren?
Over how many months?
That has to do with providing arrangements that would reduce rent over 3 months for the program recipients.
Okay, I've got over 1,200 retailers probably in my writing. I've received so many calls. None of these were able to find a way to benefit from this program. Is it that the program, the structure of it is very complicated? Does it meant to help, or really does it just meant to be there for the purpose of having something for small business support?
The program's intent is to support small businesses and their landlords, so that it is a policy that was set up with that objective in mind.
I received so many calls from various businesses. Some of them are franchisees, some of them, small business owners. None of them was able to benefit from this. How did you allocate, or did we allocate $9.74 billion without knowing how businesses is going to or are going to benefit from?
I'm struggling a bit on how to respond to your question.
Okay, I'll assist you. I'll assist you. There must be some metrics to come up with this figure. Do you have any idea how did you base this figure? Like, I mean, we know that for CERB there's between 35 to 41 billion dollar for the first 3 months. We know for other program, the wage subsidies, there was also somewhere around that or more. You know, but when it comes to that, there's, let's say, $3 billion over 3 months. How did you find a way to budget that much if so far, based on what we know, there's not many applicants are there and businesses either finding problem with the landlords in general, a lot of them facing closure because some of them, you know, they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in buying a franchise. They're facing a closure. So what was the metric? Please assist us because politically we're not able to get any answer from the ministers. We kind of have to come back to you guys and get some feedback.
I can tell you that this program was designed in conjunction with the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation and involved market research undertaken by the CMHC as part of the fact base that went into constructing and sizing the program.
So how come we're not really? I mean, the program is failing. It's been over 3 months right now, and very, very small number of or percentage of businesses have even applied. Isn't that a red flag that something has to be done or somebody has to speak out on this? Absolutely not the politicians, because I don't think they know or they have the answers.
The program was initially made available on May 25th. My understanding is that funds started to flow June 1st. I think it would be suitable to pose the question to CMHC to be tracking the trajectory of applications, but my understanding is that trajectory is increasing as time progresses.
Do you have any idea how much of the $2.74 million have been used or committed?
I do have that information at my fingertips somewhere here. So
that will be great if you have it. You can give it to us right now. I'll wait. If not, I would appreciate to have that answer come into the committee.
It'll have to, Mr. Abotev, it'll have to be in written form to the committee through our clerk because we're completely out of time now. We'll go to Mr. Drouin for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Purves, I want to thank you for the explanation with regards to the planned statutory expenditures and the almost 81 billion. And I do want to get back to you with regards to vote 5s, and I hope you can explain, and I promise you I will not interrupt you. I will give you at least 2 minutes to explain the reason why we use vote 5. But I do want to ask the folks from finance, the bills that were passed, the Emergency Response Act that was passed on March 25th and April 20th, there was a commitment from Finance and from the Minister of Finance to report to the Standing Committee on Finance on the use of these expenditures. And I'm wondering, because many of us, I haven't been to finance yet and I haven't had the chance to peruse those reports, but just wondering on the structure of those reports and the type of information you're providing to the Standing Committee on Finance with regards to the planned expenditures that we've had through the Emergency Response Act.
Sure, I can take that question on. So these reports that we're putting out to FINA, I have an example of one here, just deposited on Thursday. This is the 6th report, which put out on June 10th. And what they all do is they review essentially the different components of the Act and the different measures that have been announced to date under each of these elements. And the reason why we're doing this is that the Act is somewhat open-ended, unlike some other pieces of legislation that specify how much money is being given to whom over what period of time. These acts are quite open-ended, and they say things like authorizes payments to be made out of the consolidated revenue fund in relation to public health events of national concern. So that's pretty broad, and and I say open-ended, and that's why the minister committed to provide these reportings. So for each item, there is a little description of how much we estimate the impact from a financial standpoint to be, a description very briefly of what the item is. We describe which part of the act it is part of. And then in general, there's some kind of a status update, or we've been providing status updates in cases where information is available, which is the case for most programs, describing what can be said about the implementation of those programs. And then we have a little table in the center that describes, that kind of provides a table, an add-up table of all the measures. And we also have information on all the other elements of the COVID response plan that are not actually part of the Act, but of interest to Canadians. So the minister's reporting on those as well.
And so, for instance, we can an announcement with regards to the CERB. The Department of Finance will be providing an update to the Standing Committee at some point in 2 weeks or whenever. You'll be providing an update to the Committee on Finance on how much these measures will cost and how many Canadians have applied at some point.
That's right. So the CERB extension says that this will be that individuals that come up against the limits, the eligibility limits, will have eligibility for another 8 weeks. And so we will have, when the next report is tabled, some estimate of the fiscal impact of that decision to extend. And there are always updates provided on the current payouts to individuals under that program.
Thank you so much. Mr. Purves, vote 5, and I just want to state for the record that I have the utmost respect, Mr. Chair, of my honorable colleague, Mr. McCauley, and I hope he didn't feel like I singled him out. Of course, I would not be talking about him because I have a lot of respect for this gentleman. Mr. Purves, vote 5. Can you explain to this committee why why Treasury Board uses vote 5, or departments would be forced to use vote 5?
You can do it in 30 seconds. Your chair would greatly appreciate it.
Payments arise, and they're urgent payments, and they have to be made before the next supply cycle. Vote 5 is there to be able to facilitate circumstances when these unforeseen expenditures that are often urgent and are for important initiatives need to be made. The use of vote 5 up to now, that's in the online report, has all been for COVID-19 measures.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'll now go to Mrs. Block for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I wasn't sure if I was going to get an opportunity. My questions will be for the witnesses from the Department of Finance. Yesterday, the government of Saskatchewan unveiled a provincial budget. And I'm just wondering, why isn't the government of Canada preparing and releasing a budget for Canadians?
So I'll take that one. I think the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance have both spoken on this matter, and the government has not said that they will not produce a budget, but they are concerned about the timing, what we're able to say at a given point in time, and how easily what is said is going to stand the test of time. So I think they're a little worried about the uncertainties that are prevailing in the economy right now.
So in the current context of the pandemic, which is what I think you're probably referring to, is it within your department's capabilities to prepare a budget at this time?
Well, from a technical standpoint, lots of things mechanically can be done, but I think the real question is it the right time to be able to provide a budget that provides useful information about the government's economic and fiscal situation? We're certainly studying these issues.
Sure. So can you tell me what is the difference between a full budget and an economic or fiscal update?
Well, generally, the budget, I think, would try to provide, it tends to be a larger exercise involving more expenditures and making decisions on a go-forward basis for an entire year. Typically, an economic update is provided at a different time of the year from when we traditionally put out budgets, and often is seen as a starting point for the fiscal forecasting process that allows us to then deliver a budget in subsequent months.
So, in your opinion, would the economic upheaval of this pandemic not be an appropriate time to present Canadians with some sort of a financial update on the nation's finances?
Yeah, I don't think the decision is with Frank at this point. Just to say that we are studying these issues. We're looking at the economic, we're discussing the economic issues with the private sector economists, and there just is a great deal of uncertainty with respect to the whole set of issues around the evolution of the virus. So,
right. So, I mean, uncertainty exists not only for federal governments, but for provincial governments. And yet the government of Saskatchewan was able to work through that uncertainty and unveil a provincial budget. I believe other provincial governments are looking to do the same. How long do you think it's going to take you to study your ability to either put forward a budget for Canadians or some sort of a financial update so that they can understand exactly what the state of the nation's finances is in?
I appreciate the comment, and we're certainly doing that work. That work is underway, and we know there's a lot of interest.
And Madame McDermott, before we go to the next question, I wonder if we can get you to hold your microphone up a little closer to your mouth when responding to a question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'll try to be louder.
Mrs. Block, keep going.
I can keep going?
Please.
How much more time do I have?
You've got 1 minute, 20 seconds.
Okay. We've been asking a number of questions regarding Vote 1A and the amount budgeted or in these supplementary estimates for communication. Given that there has not been a budget, will there be savings in the finance department in advertising, and could that simply then be diverted to the advertising for COVID-19?
Sorry, just so I understand, is this a question directed to finance or just?
Yeah, to finance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I cannot hear you, Madame.
Mute. Sorry, it says I was muted. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Obviously, I'm not from the communications team, but my sense of it is that the communications team's working overtime. If anything, the new money for advertising is being fully allocated, so it's not obvious.
Right. But my question was about the fact that usually when the budget
Unfortunately, I think Madame McDermott heard your question quite clearly. At least I assume she did, and I would ask that she provide a fulsome answer to your question in writing as quickly as possible through the clerk, because we're completely out of time. We'll now go to Mr. McKinnon for 5 minutes, please.
Well, in that same line of thinking, let me ask the witnesses from finance as well. In terms of public communications on government priorities, whether they be budget related or COVID related, of course, that money would be available to broadly communicate government priorities, would it not?
Madame McDermott, I think that question was directed to you.
Sorry, no, I agree with the point that the existing Department of Finance budget would be used for all government priorities and all announcements, most of which in recent weeks and months have focused on COVID-related responses.
Is there anything else that you felt you left out of your answers to Ms. Block prior to this?
No, thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Purvis, in terms of Treasury Board, you're, of course, applying your regular rigorous oversight to spending, whether it be regular spending or in fact, exceptional spending under COVID, such as those items contained in these supplementary estimates?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. So everything that's in these supplementary estimates have been through Treasury Board ministers.
So just can you, for the benefit of members of the committee, outline that process in terms of how departments would bring to you these proposals, how they would construct their cases for spending the money that's been allocated to them, either by Parliament or by virtue of a law passed by Parliament?
Sure. So it's been a little more unusual this time around, just because of the urgency of the COVID-19 response. And so typically you have statutory authorities that exist for a whole host of different initiatives. Transfers to people, transfers to other levels of government are typically done through statutory authorities. And then a lot of the direct program spending is done, what we say, through the main estimates and supplementary estimates as additional funding is required. But in terms of dealing with the COVID-19 dislocation, there really was a combination of statutory authorities sought, as well as voted authorities. The items that you see in respect to these supplementary estimates, they've gone to Treasury Board in submissions as they normally would. And they go through the rigor that they would normally go through. But in terms of the statutory items, despite the fact that they may not be getting expenditure authority and then going for voted appropriations in Parliament, if there's programs, terms and conditions that require Treasury Board policy issues, that require Treasury Board oversight, Treasury Board has been doing the regular due diligence and rigor that they normally do on these instances. So I would say that Treasury Board, as a institution, has been operating very efficiently and has been very busy over the last few months, and has been having a lot of rigor on many of these items that go through that would normally go through Treasury Board, given program authority parameters and so forth.
Well, I want to take this opportunity, as I know my time is ending here, to extend to all of you and through you to all public servants. As a local MP and as a member of Parliament for Gatineau, a good National Public Service Week. It's been an incredibly extenuating and trying time for everyone, but for public servants, and I know many senior public servants like all of you. Donc, merci beaucoup pour votre acharnement et votre créativité.
Thank you so much for your creativity and your tenacity. I really appreciate it.
Our colleague, Mr. Green, will not be with us for the final round, so we only have one intervention left. That is be Mr. Bassarou-Duval for 2.5 minutes.
But
he's back. So we'll go now to Monsieur Bassarou-Duval for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My question has to do, is for the officials from Health Canada who are with us today. In the express money asked is 6.1 million for CFIA. I was in the last few months very much questioned by citizens who are complaining that processed foods, for processed foods, you don't have to exactly explain on the label where the stuff comes from. And why does CFIA not have a policy to force where the provenance of the ingredients is? Because people would like to know what they are buying and from where.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question. I'd be happy to pass along to CFIA those views. I thought I had heard you say that health officials were here, but I might have mistaken hearing that.
I believe Mr. Bassarou-Duval did say that there were health officials here. I'm not sure that they are, but not mishear.
Okay, so in terms of that issue, like,
Ok, désolé, j'étais certain.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was quite convinced that they were. So, of course, in which case I'll have a second question, still on the question of advertising. $50 million. A little while ago, they said it was for COVID at the beginning, and then you said you were asked why didn't you put that money in another project, and why was it included this way? Because it's not just an appropriation project about COVID, but finally it could be used for other purposes. Did I misunderstand? So what is this $50 million actually for?
Sure. So this is the $50 million for the Privy Council office, correct? For the funding for communications and marketing?
I believe that's correct, sir. And a very brief response, if you could.
Okay, so really it's funding, again, for a whole of government communication and marketing response, I believe consistent with probably what my PCO colleagues mentioned, in 4 key areas: the public health information, financial support for individuals, financial support for businesses and the economy, and public safety and security information. I don't know if my finance colleague wants to jump in on that, but did we lose sound?
Monsieur le Président, êtes-vous présent?
Mr. Chairman, are you there? I think we're not hearing the chairman.
Can you hear me now, Paul? Can you see me or hear me?
Yes, see and hear you.
For some
Thank
reason,
you.
my computer just went down for a few moments. But please, Mr. Green, you're up for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. And I was delighted to see that the Department of Crown and Indigenous Relations have included in one of their major items the request for well, I'm not delighted that the request had to be made, but here we are. The money is finally here. That includes compensation for persons who attended federally established, funded, and controlled and operated Indian Day schools. And it also included monies that will be used for legal and administration fees. I'm wondering, how much money did the government spend on this litigation from this supplementary?
We're talking about, Mr. Green, we're talking about federal Indian Day schools, the McLean Settlement Agreement, and not the 60 scoop?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So in terms of the total amount, I'm seeing $1.3 billion to the McLean Day School Settlement Corporation for individual compensation of $10,000 per class member for harms associated with attendance level 1 claims.
But out of the 481, how much of that is to be used for legal and admin fees?
69 million in class counsel for legal fees and disbursements and ongoing legal services to class members. It's not clear to me, however, I should just point out whether that is effectively part of the 481 or whether that amount is part of the broader envelope that I mentioned.
When can the claimants expect to be paid?
That we would have to get back to the committee on.
How much was the contract for Deloitte for the administration of the settlement, and why was Deloitte selected? We hear a lot about Deloitte at this committee.
I don't have that information, Mr. Green. We can certainly reach out to our colleagues at CERNA and get back to the committee on that, if that's helpful.
Okay, as it relates to the 60 scoop settlement, the request of $260 million in the supplementaries, how many people have made a claim as part of this settlement, and when can they expect to be paid?
That answer, I'm afraid, will have to be given in written form as quickly as possible through our.
I'm glad I got on the record today, Mr. Chair. Thank you for and thank you to Mr. McCauley for being the strange bedfellow.
I'll make sure that he's aware of that completely. Colleagues, we are a little over time. We will be adjourning. I will remind colleagues that we're back again for our final virtual meeting before Parliament rises for the summer this Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I look forward to seeing all of you again then. Stay safe, everyone. We are adjourned.